We have a lot on our plate from an IT perspective. I've got not just wireless systems to manage, but potentially wired networks, and I've got to worry about firewalls. I've got to worry about all of these different systems that we have in place, maybe routers and such. And so, how do I keep track of all of these different devices, and how do I know when one of them happens to have a vulnerability? Well, one of our options for this would be to go out to the common vulnerabilities and exposures list and take a look and run some searches and see if there are any CVEs out there that would alert me to problems. So let's go and dive in and see what exactly CVEs are all about. The world of security is certainly fast-paced. We are always going to have new techniques that are coming out for how to take advantage of vulnerabilities, so we have to worry about that. We have to worry about the vulnerabilities themselves and making sure that, this firmware that I just downloaded and deployed, maybe all of a sudden it was found that there was a problem with what I just installed. In fact, these vulnerabilities are constantly being discovered both from a software perspective and a hardware perspective, but also from a firmware perspective like we just mentioned. And so we might have a hardware solution that has new firmware that is known to have a particular vulnerability. And so one of these exploits can certainly be used in some cases to take advantage of those vulnerabilities as they're discovered. But how do I keep track of everything that's coming at me? Certainly I could do my best. I could maybe subscribe to email lists. I could go surf blogs, make sure that I'm following a lot of security people on social media. And there are a lot of good accounts out there that are making blogs and making social media posts that will make us aware of when there's a major vulnerability that becomes known. However, generally speaking, this isn't going to be enough because we're still likely to miss something if this is our primary means of keeping track of new vulnerabilities. And so what we could really use is a list of all of the vulnerabilities, and maybe we could say a list of common vulnerabilities and exposures that are out there. And this is where we're going to come from when we're talking about CVEs, which, yes, stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, right there at the top of the screen. CVEs are presented to us in a list on a searchable website. We can go out to this website, and what we can do is find that this is a list of the vulnerabilities that have been made known. The best part is it's open. It's for all of us. We don't have to pay for it. It's intended for all of us to be able to go out and find out if there's vulnerabilities that our organization should be aware of. The CVE list is updated and maintained by a company called the MITRE Corporation. And the MITRE Corporation actually receives funding from the US government for the sake of upkeep and making sure that everybody continues to have access to this list. So the way this works is I can point myself out to the site, I can run a search against the list, and I can maybe search for my wireless vendor. And I can find out if there's any known vulnerabilities that have released recently, maybe tied to particular hardware models, software, or otherwise firmware. Now the question is, what exactly is the process that we use to populate the CVE list? I mean, where does this come from? Is MITRE populating this entire list themselves? And the answer is actually no. But let's go ahead and walk through exactly what happens here. So first of all, what we'll find when we go out to the site is that every CVE has an identifier. This identifier takes the format of CVE dash and then a 4-digit year. So if it came out in the year I'm recording this, it would be 2023 for 2023. And then we'd have an ID at the end. I'm just going to write this as NNNN. Just be aware that this could exceed 4 digits in length if we have that many vulnerabilities in a given year, which is pretty typical these days. So, for example, if we were to go out and look at the CVE list, we would see a CVE that's labeled CVE-2023 and then -0180. And this specific vulnerability is for NVIDIA GPUs. So we can go out there, we can learn a little bit of information about what exactly this vulnerability is, and then we can decide what to do with that information. Now the question is, where are these IDs coming from? I mean, who is actually assigning these? And believe it or not, there's a lot of organizations out there that can do this without having to go through the MITRE Corporation. Any organization that participates in security research or makes security products can apply to become a CVE Numbering Authority, or CNA. And being a CNA allows them to directly submit CVEs into the online listing. And so once again, this is usually dedicated for research firms, people who are performing security research, as well as vendors, because naturally if a vendor finds that one of their products has a vulnerability, then they probably want to very quickly get that vulnerability documented and onto the site. Now, be aware that there are some limitations with regards to how useful CVEs can be to us. Specifically, what we're going to find is that they're missing some information that we might expect to see. For example, there's no way for us to tell what the severity level of a particular CVE is just by looking at the listing. We might expect that it would tell us if this is a highly urgent vulnerability or not, but we're not going to find that on the CVE list. Furthermore, we're also not going to find any sense of how to mitigate this. We're going to have to basically do the research ourselves to try to figure this out. Now, fortunately for us, there are databases out there that take this information into account. And so the CVE is sort of the starting point. We want to go out, we want to learn about a particular vulnerability, we want to understand that maybe there is one tied to the hardware or software or firmware that we're running. But at this point, we're going to have to dig a little deeper to learn what we should do about it. And so we point to other databases. For example, NIST, a well-known organization that manages standards in technology, they have a database known as the National Vulnerability Database, or NVD. And so we might go out to the NVD to learn a little bit more about this, including how to fix it, as well as what the severity level is. But how exactly are we rating the severity of this in the end? I mean, again, we don't have that with the CVE directly, but we might find some of these other databases are going to rate them. But if I'm looking at different databases, are we all using the same scoring system? Unfortunately, yes, actually. We have something that's known as the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, or CVSS. The Common Vulnerability Scoring System is going to do exactly what it sounds like. It's going to create a score, and the score is standardized. It's an open metric that applies the same rules for rating severities, and so we should all rate severities the same way. Now, the CVSS is going to be a score between 0 and 10, with 10 being the absolute most severe type of vulnerability that could be out there. And just like what we talked about earlier with risk, this score is going to take into account not only the impact that a particular vulnerability can create, but also the ease of which we can find hackers taking advantage of that vulnerability. So as you can imagine, if we do find that we've got a vulnerability out there that applies to us, we're going to want to check the CVSS through one of the other databases to try to figure out how urgent this issue is. Because if it's rated closer to a 0, then we can once again probably wait a few weeks and try to fix this on the next scheduled maintenance. But if it's pretty severe, then it might warrant scheduling maintenance for this weekend or as soon as tonight, just again, depending on the urgency at which we need to fix this. So let's go ahead and go out to the website and see what it looks like when we're looking up CVEs. We can do a Google search for CVEs or just go out to CVE.org. What's interesting about the time of this recording is that it just happened to be between websites here. They're moving everything over to truly CVE.org, whereas before it used to be at CVE.MITRE.org. And so we've got a few functions here that, for example, if I wanted to search for the CVE list or search for a keyword against that list, I'd have to go back to the old site, which we'll do here in a moment. But we do see I can enter a CVE ID up here. The CVE ID has the exact format that we said, CVE-the year-the identifier. And so at this point, let's just go ahead and go to the keyword search. And what I might do here is just search for a vendor. Let's just say Aruba. Maybe I've deployed Aruba Wireless or something along those lines. So I can run a search here against the CVE list, and we do see that, holy cow, we've already got over 20,000 different identifiers here in the year 2023, and we're not even halfway through the year yet as of the time of this recording. And so as we scroll down, we see that Aruba doesn't have a lot in 2023. Good for them. We do see some vulnerabilities in 2022. They got up to at least 44,500 in 2022. So again, just a lot of CVEs out there. Very difficult to keep up with, even with this list. But what we can do here is we can click on one of these identifiers. So we'll just click on this. We can learn more about it. This has to do with, well, just at a glance here, it looks like it's Aruba Network's access point management protocol. So this does have something to do with their wireless network. We do see that Aruba's got some links in here for us, which is really nice. The assigning CNA, by the way, this is interesting because we can see who actually created the CVE. In this case, you might be scratching our head saying, what's Hewlett-Packard doing here? HP, why did HP create this? Well, HP owns Aruba, specifically the enterprise side of HP, which they split off a few years ago. So either way, what's happening here is we've got a CVE created by HP for their Aruba product. And again, we don't get a lot of information from the CVE. This just identifies that this vulnerability exists. But what I can do is see up here, here's the big identifier, but right next to it, it says I can learn more at the National Vulnerability Database, the NVD, which is what we alluded to earlier. And here's where we can find the CVSS severity rating. We can find how to fix the information, the software versions that are impacted. And so we can go and click on this, and it'll pull up the NIST website, and we can learn a lot more information here. There's actually quite a bit here. Look at the score on this one. I actually just clicked on a random one. 9.8. That is about as high as you can expect to see. This is a very big deal. I don't know what the details of this one are, but we can scroll down. We can see different configuration examples, especially the versions of software that are impacted. And so clearly, if you happen to be running an Aruba network, you would probably want to be aware of this particular CVE. But from here, we're going to need to do some more investigation into how exactly to fix it. But clearly, this gives us a pretty darn good starting point as far as identifying vulnerabilities and working our way towards remediation. So in review here, CVEs are listings of vulnerabilities that we can use to stay updated. And we can point ourselves out to the CVE website and take a quick look to see, all right, what types of vulnerabilities are out there. I can search for my vendors that I use and try to figure things out from there. Now, each CVE is going to have an identifier. It's going to be CVE dash the year and then dash a particular identifier. So that identifier is numeric. We're just going to count up as the year goes on. And once we get to the new year, we can start that counter over again. So just to keep in mind that it's not always going to be exactly 3 or 4 digits or what have you. It just depends on how many vulnerabilities there are that are discovered by the end of the year. Now, CVE itself is not going to give us all the options we want or need. We're going to have to go out to some databases, and we'll find that there's a scoring system out there that will tell us how critical a CVE is. We're going to rely on CVSS scores, and those scores will be between 0 and 10. And we can just use this severity information to try to figure out how urgent it is that we get this thing figured out and patched, assuming patching is the mitigation that we need to deploy. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. Thanks for watching. Be sure to click here to subscribe to CBT Nuggets and click the notification bell to make sure that you're aware of every time we post new content. If you're interested in a career in IT or you want to brush up on your IT skills, then swing over to our website, and while you're there, be sure to sign up for a free trial.